on this month's episode of the Book Reports Podcast.
Tonight on Book Reports Podcast.
On this episode of 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 Book Reports Podcast.
Book It Done Me Wrong.
Cameron's romantic fan fiction.
Ricky Ricardo and the Babalu Gang.
Shakira, the autobiography.
Nipsey Russell.
Bryce and Sam are giant poo-poo heads.
C.S. Lewis, Fists of Fury.
Submarines, the plains of the ocean.
Bryce has never seen The Wizard of Oz?
I'm not complaining, I'm just making fun of you.
Book Reports Podcast Halloween Special.
And much more.
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 Welcome to Book Reports Podcast, a soon-to-no-longer-be monthly podcast of high literary discussion and low-brow humor. I have been Sam Tyler.
And I am still Bryce Diener.
And this is it, folks. This is our last episode of Book Reports Podcast. So all of you hepcats out there who are waiting for the series to finish before you start listening, now is your chance. And you won't know that I've said this because you weren't listening. See how this doesn't work for you? And seeing as it is our last episode, we decided to cancel all of our guests' contracts and just have it be bare bones. The network has come and stripped everything out. It is just the basic staff of writers and just us.
That's right. If you've ever seen an episode of 60 Minutes and seen the background of them and thought, wow, they put a lot of money into that, we've put less in ours.
Now, as we look back on our previous 24 episodes, how has doing Book Reports Podcast affected the way you read books?
I think, for me, it's definitely improved my speed reading. Leisurely, I would read a book in like 3 months. But for this, you have to do one once a month. I'm setting aside more time to read, and I guess versus like watching TV.
How do you read books?
If I'm reading it leisurely, like I just kind of have to be in the mood for it. You know, there isn't just like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, time to read. I definitely have to be in the mood for a book, I think.
Interesting. If I have to wait for somebody, books are what I'm doing. If I'm in the bathroom, books are what I'm doing, along with other things. And I read myself to sleep pretty much every night. For me, there's always a time in the day to be reading a book at some point. Of course, I don't have an iPhone, which I suppose helps quite a bit.
Or friends.
I'm happy with my choices. So for you, you actually do carve out time?
For this podcast specifically, I've had to I better read this book because I'm doing a podcast on it in 2 days and I haven't started. So let's do that instead.
Honestly, it just kind of blows my mind that you don't read yourself to sleep. Maybe I'm weird about this, but that just strikes me as being a great time to read a book.
For me, though, going to sleep is one of my favorite parts of the day, and I hate to ever get in the way of that.
Really? Oh.
Like, for my job, I have to be up at 4 a.m., so I go to bed at, 8, 9 o'clock.
Oh, sure.
And, sometimes it'll be, 7:40, and it's like, oh, I could go to bed now and get 20 extra minutes. It's very exciting.
I can't do that. I hate going to sleep, and unless I'm sleepy, I do literally have to read myself to sleep, or I'm not going to sleep.
When I'm laying there trying to fall asleep is when some of my best jokes actually get formed, because all I can do, I'm alone with my thoughts. I'm not being distracted by a storyline of a book I was just reading or anything like that. And if I can remember them into the next morning, I'm like, wow, that is a good joke. And so I'll try to write this down.
Interesting that you have to decide to read a book. I guess that's probably true for a lot of people, I suppose, having to make that decision. I guess for me it just comes very naturally because it's something I've always done.
Hey, Sam, how has Book Reports Podcast changed you?
It's made me more aware of my opinion of the book as I'm reading it. I find myself looking at the books more critically and judging them as I talk about them because I have to think about, am I going to be able to articulate my feelings about this book on the podcast?
Sure.
So I can kind of form my opinions a little bit firmer, a little bit more clearly as I'm reading books, I find. It also has changed my book selection because I know that if I'm reading a book, it'd be nice if it's one I'm going to talk about on the podcast. So I've been reading books that I think will be fun to talk about with you specifically.
Okay.
You may not be able to notice it, but I've tried to think of books that'll be fun and interesting to bring around to have a greater variety to them. And I think, too, it also has broadened the books I read as well. I am trying to give more variety to the show, so I've been reading books that have been sitting on the shelf that would just be fun to talk about, not necessarily ones that I need to read right now. I've been trying not to read books. This is a book series, so I'm not reading the next 20 books in a book series. I've been jumping around more, and it's definitely given me more of, there's a certain self-consciousness because, hey, everybody, I'm reading this book, so everybody knows this is a book Sam has read. So there's a certain sense of, if I read this book, how am I going to share it with other people, and is this a book that's accessible to other people? There are books that I have on my shelf that I just don't think would be fun to introduce to other people, so I haven't really read those as much.
I think it definitely has changed the style of books that I've thought maybe other people enjoyed.
Now that we're ending the podcast, do you think you're going to stick with trying to read more? Or do you think that it's just one of those things where it's just going to slide away?
I think it's definitely put me on a different path.
Okay,
and I'm definitely going to go backtracking. Go back to my old ways.
Book Reports podcast makes me want to read less. That's what we wanted out of this. That's exactly what we wanted out of this.
People have said after someone leaves college, the number of books that they read in a year is like one or less.
Right.
I associate books with learning, and learning was boring, so let's not do that anymore. I definitely read, more than one book a year after college. I have friends who listen to this podcast who felt that way, who definitely have started reading more.
Oh, fantastic.
And
So going on from here, Bryce,
do
you have any plans for the first book you read that is not specifically for Book Reports podcast?
There are definitely a few thick books. Ones I definitely can't finish in a month.
Right.
There's The Bridge Too Far, like 800 pages. No, it's not maybe like 500 pages. And
it's like 200 pages.
Yeah.
It's a chick track.
Yeah. It's a picture book. But there's no way I'm finishing it.
Get the crayons out. It's my Bridge Too Far coloring book.
I ran out of red again.
Camos would take the longest to color.
And there's one, A Gathering of Saints, which is like secret murders in the Mormon church or something like that.
Oh, these are both books you talked about for our library sale special.
Yes. I was looking at my bookshelf last night, and I was thinking, I can pick any of these and read them as long as I want. But I didn't start because I wanted to keep my current book in my mind.
Right.
It's like, quote the guy from that Twilight Zone epised, there's time now. Yeah.
That's a great idea. Bryce's glasses just fell off and I stepped on them.
But there was time now. How about you?
I have book series that I've talked about one book from the series.
Okay.
And I didn't really want to bring them around again for another month, so I'm looking forward to going back and continuing some of those series. John Carter is one of them, yeah. I have some more of the Discworld books, and I've got more of the Aubrey Maturin series, which I talked about all the way back in episode 3. I do read multiple books in a month, but I try to make sure that the books I'm reading are all ones that might be fun to talk about on Book Reports podcast. I have been reading books from those two series before, but always when I know I've got my book ready. So it'll be fun to be able to just read and not have to give people my opinion. I will still do that. Like, right. I will stop you in the street, listeners, and give you my opinion. I'm that kind of person. But it will be nice not to have that pressure to be able to just pick what I want to read and have fun with and not have to worry about, can I articulate this to somebody else for a while. It'll also be nice, too, like you were talking about, the bigger books that I'm not sure I'll be able to read quickly enough or are too big for this podcast to handle.
Brother.
Too hot for this podcast. Yo, brother. Ooh, yeah.
I thought that's where you're going.
Big books, all right, brother. Ooh, yeah.
With a Slim Jim.
That's what this podcast really has been lacking. I think we'll do 5 more episodes so we can keep doing Macho Man Randy Savage impressions.
The book I read for this episode.
Oh, yeah.
So my book is first, and this is actually really embarrassing, Sam. This is a book we've joked about for a long time, Twilight.
Oh, you poor ignorant sap. I can't believe... Yeah, I read it too. And for those of you who are looking at the title of this episode, you should be aware we both read Twilight.
Hey, wait a minute. I thought that was referring to their last episode. Their Twilight episode. Turn it off.
Yeah, we decided to put our money where our mouth is, and we both engaged with a copy of Twilight.
Yeah, I got the audiobook. I thought, what way can I spite Sam one last time? An audiobook.
And it worked! Yeah, we decided, since we talked about this book so many times, there was no book that could break us out of this podcasting thing better than Twilight.
If you go back to the Brandon episode, Brandon Mestark, our good friend, he likes this book. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of this, just remind yourself, after we've given our opinion, Brandon likes this book. He's a great guy. I love him very much. I don't love this part of him. I may have already
this book was not
my opinion.
This book was not my favorite brand of heroin either. That's for sure.
I do want to give a quick note that the person who read the book for me, I guess you could say that.
Your reader?
The narrator of the audiobook is named Ilana Kedushin.
And the book is by Stephanie Meyer. I suppose that's important,
They
too.
never mentioned that.
Actually, if you're not familiar with Twilight, folks, and by now I can't imagine you're not.
Thank you for coming out of the rock from under which you were.
After deciding to give this whole Y2K thing a good 18 years to settle down, you came out of your bunker It is a story of, actually, a young adult paranormal romance story about a young girl who moves to the Pacific Northwest and meets a mysterious young man who it turns out is a vampire, and they fall in love. That's the capsule of this story.
Yes. Can we talk about the book cover? A lady holding an apple? There's very little fruit eaten in this.
I was kind of puzzling over the cover as well. I think what it's supposed to be is the temptation over whether or not the two characters should be together.
So it's definitely a even the garden type of the temptation.
Although, going off of the cover, it's Edward's hands holding the apple he's not supposed to hold, which is Bella. I think it's a good cover for this book, because it is the major theme of temptation between the two characters and whether or not they should be together. We'll give our answers to that question later on.
Yeah. Starting off with this book, she moves to this new town because the reason why kind of confused me, her mom was going to be engaged to a guy, but they were going to move, but for some reason they didn't want her to go, so she moved to the Pacific Northwest where her father was a sheriff.
Her mom's boyfriend is a minor league baseball player who's going to be moving around a lot. So she was going to be staying put to go to school, and they were going to move around a lot, so she wouldn't be alone. She was moving in with her father.
That makes sense. Okay.
Her father, who is a saint, by the way.
He is honestly one of my favorite characters.
He puts up with so much crap in this book. He really does.
I think we'll get to favorite characters later.
We will.
I mean, yeah, that's just a little taste. I do like Charlie. Or Dad, depending on who's talking. I think she definitely contradicts herself. If you're paying attention, she's annoyed that all the kids are paying attention to her.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you're Isabella. Actually, it's Bella. To everybody. And then the one group of people that ignore her, which is what she wants. She's like, who are they? I'm interested in them. It's like, you idiot. I don't like, from the very beginning, and obviously it's the Cullens, like Edward and his siblings, and I guess step-siblings and all that stuff. But it's just a huge contradiction. Like, everyone else is paying attention to you, but you're only interested in the people that don't care about you.
Bella definitely has Bell's disease, as in Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, sure.
Like, she is the smartest girl in the class. Throughout the book, she doesn't have to do the homework assignments because she did them already. Or, she's already read this novel. I'm going to go read Wuthering Heights. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And she's very special, and she's the prettiest girl in the school, and all the boys love her, and no one fights like Gaston. Honestly, like, there were a lot of interesting parallels, I thought, between Twilight and Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Besides just the fact that Bella is basically Belle, there's also the abusive relationship, and then we grow to love each other. I mean, that's decidedly all through this book.
Yeah. So that really annoyed me from the very beginning.
Well, a teenage girl protagonist is a hard sell for me. It's so far away from my point of view.
We can never relate to that.
I think she did a good job of portraying the confusion of the teenage years, but that didn't make her sympathetic to me, decidedly. I thought that was trouble.
This is one note against Alana Kadushin. Every time she said Bella, it was in the most, like, annoying, like,
oh,
Bella. I'm like, ugh! Shut up!
Could you please read one of Bella's lines in the style you heard?
Sure. In order to get through this book, I started finding lines, like just one or two lines that I could take out of context. So that helped me get through this book better. Because very quickly, I was like, this book is not for me. I'm only doing this for the podcast. This is the first line. It was ridiculous and egotistical to think that I could affect anyone that strongly. It was impossible. So that's Bella talking to Edward about his obsession with her. And also, I hate Bella. So it worked for me. It's ridiculous and egotistical to think that I could have that effect on anyone so strongly. It's impossible. No, it's not, Bella. I hate you very much.
I also did not care for Bella. Besides just her point of view, except for at the very end of the book, where she does things to be able to save her family. Aside from that, she's pretty selfish during this entire book, I think.
Yeah.
I did not really root for her at any time during this book.
She definitely came off as a good cook.
Yes.
Which I thought was interesting, because she falls for a guy that doesn't like food.
That opens up a question I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
How do you feel about Bella and Edward as a couple and their reasons for becoming a couple?
How do you mean? There's definitely guys in her high school that are her age that are nice to her, that like her for innocent reasons.
Right. Teenage boy reasons. Yeah.
Compared to, your smell is so intoxicating. I haven't smelled anyone like you in 100 years. I'd like to suck out all your blood. And
I promise not to kill you.
Yeah. It's like, ooh, let's get married to that guy.
The guys who do riff tracks did a parody song of Twilight called Sparkly Vampires. And it ends with, Sparkly vampires, I love you. And I know that you love me too. I can tell by the way you don't kill me. That's basically that relationship in a nutshell. So Edward's attraction to Bella is based on how she smells and how much he wants to kill her.
Yes.
Bella's attraction to Edward is the exact same feeling every woman around Edward has for the entire book.
Yeah,
there is nothing special about the way Bella feels about Edward. Everybody who interacts with Edward who is female has the exact same reaction Bella has. Yeah. It's just Edward being Edward. That's the attraction.
As he looks through his eyelashes. Can you talk about that? His massive eyelashes?
I like to imagine he has huge eyelashes and his forehead is just, because he's always looking over it.
Well, she says his giant marble forehead. So
he's got a billboard face.
I like to think, like, when he flutters, like, all the papers in the room go flying. Like, there's a giant breeze. Edward!
I'm taking a test over here. My taxes! That's actually what caused the van to almost hit Bella. It was just the wind from his eyelashes.
That's how he can get from point A to point B so quickly. He flies! Like how Dumbo uses the ears.
That's his secret vampire power. I had to have a similar way to get through this book, finding things that I thought were funny and weird. Sure. That was exactly what I was doing too. Yeah.
So I found quotes that I could take out of context.
Yeah.
How did you get through that?
I enjoyed the first 130 pages of this book. I came into this book with as open a mind as I possibly could. I tried to get rid of the movie. I've seen the movie. One of the hardest obstacles was getting all that imagery out of my head, but I was able to do that fairly successfully.
Was it hard to get Christian and...
I was able to overcome that pretty well.
The Hufflepuff out of your
head? The Hufflepuff? You mean Arpats?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to get rid of that and then divorce myself from all of my pre-existing stuff. And for the first 130 pages, I think I did pretty well. It was fun for me to avoid knowing the ending. I was able to forget that for the most part and just kind of lose myself into what's going on and is Bella going to be killed by Edward? Because if you read Twilight thinking Edward is a bad guy, it's far more interesting. By keeping myself from knowing what happens later, I was able to be interested in what's happening to Bella and what is actually going on with Edward. After things solidify, however, and it turns out Edward is not trying to seduce Bella so we can eat her, the book kind of lost something for me. And I started having to play different games. This is a good time to highlight what you get from not getting an audiobook. For me, I was able to generate fun by figuring out what people's voices sound like. I decided that Bella pretty much had to be Kristen Schaal. If you're not familiar with Kristen Schaal, she is the voice of Mabel on Gravity Falls. She's a very funny comedian who has a fantastic, very fun voice to listen to.
She's the lead female in Flight of the Conchords, if you've seen that show.
The book reached a turning point for me on page 286, where I had two moments that completely changed Edward for me. Okay. And for the rest of the book, this was my Edward. The first is he's driving the car and he turns the radio to an oldies station. Here's what happens. He had turned the radio to an oldies station and he sang along with a song I'd never heard. He knew every line. I decided the song was That's Amore.
Did he sing it good in your head?
No. Every window was down as loud as he could. But the turning point really came for me on the very next page. I was born in Chicago in 1901. So for the rest of this book, Edward is wearing a Cubbies baseball cap, a Cubbies t-shirt, and has the broadest, thickest Chicago accent I could imagine. So if I could just read a further excerpt with what I hear Edward as. You see, every person smells different, has a different essence. If you locked an alcoholic in a room full of stale beer, he'd gladly drink it. But he could resist, if he wished to, if he were a recovering alcoholic. Now let's say you placed in that room a glass of 100-year-old brandy, the rarest, finest cognac, and filled the room with its warm aroma. How do you think you would fare then? That was my Edward for the rest of the book.
That's really good.
The second he said Chicago, and I was born in Chicago in 1901. You know, that was my Edward for the rest of the book. And it changed things around for me completely. It just became so ridiculous. That really made the book a lot more fun for me. And I was able to put that in my interpretation because I wasn't hearing somebody else's voice, I think. But,
can I share my Edward voice?
Yes.
So obviously Alana was the voice of Edward. She didn't do a lot of extra voices. Every time I'd write down one of these ridiculous lines of Edward's, I went with the stereotypical vampire voice. And so let me share a line from Edward. Bella, blah, you're utterly ridiculous. Blah, blah. Bella, you're utterly ridiculous. So, would you like me to read more?
Yeah, a longer one.
So I'll just go through my list. This one's from Bella. My mind doesn't work right. I'm a freak. I thought that was fun. Guess who this character is? Blah! Bring on the shackles. I'm your prisoner. Blah!
The gentle kidding between Edward and Bella sounds like an abusive relationship constantly.
It does.
I mean, there's a lot
There's a lot of, why didn't you listen to me? Because she has her own right to do what she wants, you idiot.
Also, how controlling Edward is. He watches her while she sleeps. Mm-hmm. Is that supposed to really make us think they should end up together? Go lie to your father. There's a lot in this book that kind of feel like Edward and Bella are going to end up divorced 2 years later. You know, like this controlling couple, two people who just should not be together.
Tell me who you think this character is. Blah! I could reach out, meaning to touch your face and crush your skull by mistake. Blah! That was Edward. If you didn't know. This is Bella. I really, really hate forks.
What'd you have against Dumbledore's Phoenix?
So there I am walking in the woods, group ahead of me walking, and they're discussing about what was the name of the city that Bella was from. And so I only listened to the audiobook, and Jim Dale's accent obviously screwed up the word, and I confidently walked up to him and I said, "It's Fox!" and walked away. Really For those who don't know, that's a throwback to our Harry Potter episode. Feel free to give that a listen. There's one from Alice, his sister, I guess it is. There's like 3 women in that family, and they're all the same to me.
I think Alice is probably my favorite Colin.
She's the nice one.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because there's a mean one, and then there's the mom.
Not Rosalie, who has, what was the quote? A body a swimsuit model would die for. Thank you very much, Bella.
So Alice said, "Do you think any of us want to look into his eyes for the next 100 years? That just sounded like a giant insult. So I love it.
So now we know Edward is cross-eyed as well.
with a Chicago accent.
Emma and I are going hunting grizzly bears. I'm for mountain lions myself, but Emmett's just got to have his grizzly bears. He loves the bears.
And then the final quote is from Bella. "This looks like a horror movie waiting to happen."
Oh, that's good. This is a book you and I did not enjoy, for the most part.
Yes.
But I do think that there still are things that we can find to and enjoy and have fun with. What's your favorite thing about this book that you did not put into it yourself?
Like you were saying, like the first 100 pages are interesting because there's this character we don't know about. Then like there's a big chunk. Oh, they're building a romantic relationship. Yada, yada, yada. Then there's a small section, I believe it's like chapter 13. It's Carlisle's chapter. And it's just a small chapter, but it's about his backstory.
Yeah.
And I found that really interesting because you're getting the history of a vampire that doesn't have any romance in it. The rest of the book is romance again.
Well,
so, like,
romance in her attempt at a cliffhanger, exciting ending, which I didn't care for either.
Yeah, we'll get to that too.
I agree with you. I think that is the most interesting stuff in this book. And the first 100 pages, I would say, are my favorite part. That what is going on, I thought was very well done. I wish she had made her vampires more interesting. I agree with you that when he talks about the backstory about Carlisle, it's interesting stuff.
Sure.
But I think her version of vampires are really wasting what's fun and interesting about vampires.
Okay.
Like, for example, one thing that's fun about vampires is that because they're mythological and come from all these different folklores around the world, they all have fun, weird rules.
Yeah.
They all have weird compulsions and things that can kill them and things that they have to avoid. And just to highlight this a little bit, I brought along my favorite book about vampires, which is the Night's Black Agents role-playing game by Kenneth Haidt. In this book, Kenneth Haidt compiles lists of all the things that hurt vampires.
Okay.
And these lists are just really fun to read, but they give a good example of what's interesting about vampires and what kind of fun things you can do with vampires.
Like, they definitely made the point in the book, like, oh, there's a crucifix over there. Like, there was a crucifix in the house.
Yeah.
Because it was made by Carlisle's dad.
This is the list of banes, the things that can kill a vampire, compiled by Kenneth Haidt in this book. Beheading, crucifixes, holy water, holy wafer, or holy symbol or sacred object, dead man's blood ingested accidentally, death of the vampire creator or sire, drowning, enchanted or blessed blades, exorcism, fire, wolves, garlic, etc. And then we have what I think is most fun are the blocks, things that vampires can't cross, things vampires can't go by. Aloe vera, blood of a black dog, broom across or behind the door, cigarette smoke, crucifix, icon, or other holy symbol, garlic, basil, hawthorn, holly, incense, juniper, peachwood, prayers, sacred text, running water, that was one of Count Dracula's flaws, he couldn't cross running water, shoes turned backwards, sticky rice, wild rose, and wolfsbane. And there are things that vampires have to do, things they can't avoid doing.
Yeah.
Counting things. That's a big one. Drinking blood if seen or smelled. Lie down and sleep at sunrise. May only move towards target indirectly or obliquely. Untie any knots encountered. These are all ones that are real from folklore around the world.
Right.
And they're all weird and interesting. And they're a part of vampire lore that I think is the most fun. When there's a vampire in a story, the question isn't, what is this thing? Is it a vampire? It's how do we stop it? How do we work around it? And that's one of the big themes of Dracula. The most important vampire story of all time is what are Dracula's weaknesses and how can we exploit them?
Sure.
In Twilight, the only weakness the vampires have is being ripped apart. Thank you. So if we were to say, rip apart a human being, that won't kill them. So this is an easy way for us to figure out who's a vampire and who isn't. Thank you so much. It's just an easy, oh yeah, that's all we have to do is rip them apart. In my opinion, she made her vampires boring in that sense.
Yeah.
Now, she makes up a little bit by giving some of them special, interesting powers that are connected to the people they were before they became vampires, which I thought was a fun concept. But I really think her vampires are bland and boring, and I wish she'd done something more interesting.
The one time that they fight another vampire, James, in that old ballerina studio, it's like, don't worry, my brothers took care of him. It's like, tell me how they, what did they do?
Yes, I know. Oh.
That's like the one interesting part was like, oh, here's a good fight scene.
Yes.
Let's not worry about that. Let's get back to the romance.
I agree. The most interesting things in this book are not Bella and Edward. And it's a shame they're the main characters. There are so many interesting things happening in the background. There are so many interesting ideas and interesting points of view that I would rather read than Bella and Edward's. Would rather read than Bella's, period.
Yeah.
It's kind of a shame that she is the main viewpoint character.
Now, there is one character who's, I think we could say, is a main character that we have yet to mention, and that's Jacob. Can we spend some time talking about maybe how Jacob is portrayed in the movie versus the book?
Okay.
There's that whole argument, Edward versus Jacob. And if you just read this first book, it's not really an argument at all, because Jacob's like this 15-year-old kid. He's being a kid.
Right.
And that's understandable. And only at the end is like, oh yeah, I've grown to 6 feet 1 inch.
Yes, I've grown a foot since the start of this book.
Yes. Why, is there a full moon?
He was wearing platform shoes, I'm pretty sure. He's a disco werewolf. No, wait, he grew a foot because he had his werewolf bar mitzvah.
Boys becoming men,
men becoming wolves. That's exactly what it is.
That's what happened, yeah.
I wish I'd thought of that when I was reading the book. That would have changed it so much.
Just reading this book or listening to it, there's really no argument for it. Like maybe in the later books, I think there's three.
The next book is the one where Jacob really steps in.
Okay. Yeah, he's closer to her in age, but still it seems kind of creepy that he's 15, she's 17. But then you think, oh wait, Edward's like 118 years old. That's even worse.
Well, not to mention the fact that Bella flirts with him and leads him on throughout the book. The one less thing I like about Bella's one, she's a manipulator.
Yeah, well, she gets it from her boyfriend.
I think she gets it from her mom, personally. I did not like the mom a bit.
Do you feel the same way about Jacob versus Edward? Do you think...
Jacob gets to do pretty much nothing in this book. The only reason he's in this book at all, I feel like, is to set him up for the later ones.
Okay.
Bella could have just looked up vampire online, like she does later on, and not have had any interaction with Jacob, where Jacob tells him that they're vampires.
Sure.
He has nothing to do with this plot, really, except to foreshadow the fact there are werewolves in the next book. It's nice that she had the next book planned out at this stage, which I think is nice. Sure. She knew where she wanted to go to it. And she set up roots in this book, which I thought was good too. But Jacob has no chance right now to be with Bella. It doesn't exist yet. The next book is where that starts taking up a bit. The way this story ends with Edward and Bella together, it's very annoying to me that the next book there's a chance they're not together. That's not a story I'm interested in. Which is kind of a shame, because of the two of us, I think we can all agree that I'm the one who loves romance. No. You tended to enjoy romance in your books more than I did.
Going into this book, I tried to get Kristen Stewart out of my head and Robert Pattinson. And I wanted to go into this what if I come out of this loving this book?
I was hoping you would.
I was really afraid that would happen, but I was willing for that to happen.
Right.
And I was like, oh, thank heavens, I hate it. There were honestly points Bella would say something, it's like, and his angel face. And I said out loud, oh my word. Rolling my eyes, this can't be coming out of someone's mouth. Why are these words put in sequence?
I was also going into this book hoping I would like it.
Yeah.
I genuinely wanted to be able to say, we were wrong, this is actually a pretty good book, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
My opinion about this book hasn't changed. It really hasn't. And I was hoping you would enjoy the romance, and I was hoping I would enjoy the vampire part.
I was definitely hoping I would enjoy, because I like it in Harry Potter, so that's where I think we all got this from, is I do enjoy a bit of the...
I wish you'd just mind it instead of actually kissing me.
How else am I supposed to get that sound? I wanted to ask you, this is a fun question. How do you relate to Bella in terms of she's awful at gym class?
Bella's clumsiness made me wonder if she does it on purpose to get attention.
Yeah.
She mentions it so often, it felt like it's intentional.
Like her entire badminton team is her and Tyler, who's the guy that almost hit her with the van, which I think out of all the guys who she goes to school with, Tyler's my favorite. One, because he almost killed her, and two, he just seems the nicest out of all the men who I forget their names.
The inexplicable crowd of people who are attracted to Bella, I thought was kind of strange. Yeah, that's for sure.
But like she just stands in the corner with the racket behind her back while Tyler does a
Everything.
1-on-2. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, this sounds like what Sam would do in gym class.
I definitely enjoyed the fact that she had flaws. I just wish that she didn't have so many of them that I hated. Clumsiness just became annoying because it was mentioned so many times.
Sure.
She could have just had 2 or 3 points where there was clumsiness that came up, and she would have been clumsy. But it came up so many times. It was almost like Bella wanted us to know that she's clumsy because she wants something special about her.
Right. This is a point that you had made to me, not this month when we're reading this book, but you made it to me in the past, I think. Each vampire seems to have their own specific gift. You know, Edward can read minds. Alice can see the possible future. We don't really get into the others, other than they're beautiful.
I think Emmett's power is he's super strong.
Oh, that's right.
And I love that the mother figure, Esme's, is she's super loving. That's literally what the book says, is she's super loving. It's a nice power to have, but if your vampire power is you're super loving, you may want to think about learning how to turn into a bat sometime. Although, to be fair, that is Mr. Rogers' vampire power, so I guess we shouldn't make fun of her too badly.
I'd let him suck my neck any day. The other guy, not Emmett or I think there's a...
Jasper.
Jasper. If he touches someone, he can like influence them.
Oh, he's around them, he can change emotions.
That's something. Yeah. You had made the point in the past that it's almost like the Holy Spirit giving Christians power.
Well, actually, you made that point.
Did I?
Yeah.
Okay,
it was your point.
It sounds smart. I'll take credit. Apparently, I, in the past, mentioned that it's very similar to how the Holy Spirit gives us each our own, power. Mine's laser vision.
My left hand is a flamethrower. And I can't turn it off.
I doubt that's what Stephanie Myers had in mind. I bet I could sneak the Holy Spirit into here.
You know what this atheistic vampire book needs? The Holy Spirit.
Do you think it could relate to, do you think it's similar to the Holy Spirit?
I don't think so. It's an interesting idea that the powers are all related to the person you were before you became a vampire.
Sure.
I think that's kind of fun. I don't really think there's any intentional parallel, certainly. I mean, we can say we can read into it's like it, but I don't think it's intentional. Anyway.
I guess going off that, too, we get this whole idea that Edward can't read Bella's mind. I tried to listen later in the story. It's like, I don't think that's ever explained why. Did you catch that?
My fan theory is because she isn't thinking about anything. There's nothing going. That squirrel is not turning the wheel. There's never given a reason. Maybe it's explained in a later book, but I think there really is no reason. I think it's just that's why he's attracted to her.
That's my fan theory of that's why he falls for her. For the first woman in 100 years, he can't hear her thoughts. It's like, finally. What a reprieve. I love this woman.
I love this woman. You can bite my neck anytime. That has to help their relationship somehow, to be able to have that privacy. I hope it's explained in a later book.
Yeah.
Because it kind of feels like Bella got her vampire power too early. Or maybe she was a vampire the whole time.
So I think it's pretty obvious to us, but I mean, I'll present the question anyway. Who is the target audience for this book?
The target audience for this book, teenage girls.
Yeah.
That definitely is the demographic this book sought, and I think it's the demographic this book definitely earned. I think this book is a really good match for the group of people who want a fun romance story with darker themes in it that doesn't actually look at that darkness very closely and ask the questions about what does this darkness actually mean.
We're going into great detail of describing the background of the world or anything like that.
Right. There are books that are good without me enjoying them. It just means I'm not the right person for these books. We make fun of Twilight a lot, and we're going to continue doing that for quite a while.
It's who we are.
But this is a book that has nothing actually wrong with it. We didn't like the main character.
Yeah.
I don't think it's because she was badly written.
Sure.
It's because it's not a character I'm interested in.
Yeah, we were not the target audience.
Right. After getting to know Bella for a while, she's somebody I don't want to be stuck behind in a line. I'd have to keep catching her when she falls.
I definitely saw it as the teenage girl is the target audience.
Yeah.
And it made me worried because how influential it made, this is how teenage girls should act. They should be desired by older men, and he should treat them badly. If a guy in your class is interested in you, just ignore that guy. Go after the guy that doesn't want anything to do with you.
Yes, and no. Besides being Beauty and the Beast, this book reminds me most of being Beauty and the Beast combined with Pride and Prejudice. The plot structure isn't that different. The initial meeting and Mr. Darcy's a jerk. That is very much a part of this book. I have to wonder how much Pride and Prejudice she had in mind when she wrote it. Mm-hmm. I don't think we can honestly say that generations of girls have been too badly scarred by reading Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
I don't like the relationship between Bella and Edward, but if you really want to get a vampire as a boyfriend, you've got bigger problems.
Nosferatu is single, ladies.
Who doesn't like those eyebrows? He's got those Edward Cullen eyebrows. If you really want a vampire for a boyfriend, you've got bigger problems than you can really blame on Twilight. I do see what you're saying, though. Like, fundamentally, Ella and Bedward's relationship doesn't strike me as healthy, but Bella's a teenage girl.
Yeah.
And Edward is a really old vampire. How they're doing okay considering. I mean, he does treat her well when he isn't saying things that could be interpreted as being abusive. There's that. Ladies of the world, if a man does watch you while you sleep, maybe tell a friend about that.
Buy some French blind.
Even better. Or buy some French kisses from Bryce and me. New podcast.
Welcome to Kissing Booth with Sam and Bryce.
Today we're discussing the technique of checking each other's tonsils. I'd like to move on to the one bright ray of sunshine in the cloudy Pacific Northwestern sky, and that is our favorite character. Because I'm pretty sure you and I have the exact same one.
Yeah, let's say them together.
Bella.
And then... Yeah.
What's your favorite character, Bryce?
I think it's definitely a tie. Carlisle.
Okay.
Or Charlie.
Charlie is definitely my favorite character. Yeah. Easily. But that's a good choice, though. Carlisle is interesting.
He accepted who he was, but he wasn't willing to become the beast that he was. And he's like, well, I have plenty of time to become a doctor now and help humans. And so he's like, well, I'm alive forever, so I'll just start doing that. And then he's like, oh, well, I can help these people that are going to die, but they'll live forever. And so I think that was probably a difficult choice, too, because there's a lot of people that died of the Spanish flu. But I'll just say one. I think Carlisle's backstory and just the fact that he's so beautiful. Oh, it's that's so young looking, and everyone remarks on that.
Early on in the book, I really enjoyed the fact that Stephanie Meyer spent the time to really describe things.
Sure.
I kind of wish she'd laid off the descriptions later on, because there are too many times where they talk about how young Dr. Carlisle looks and how good looking he is. That, Mr. Carlisle saved me from the Spanish flu in 1901, and I owe him a great deal.
And
he's a very compassionate man.
Thank heavens, because I was able to see the Cubbies win back then, and back in 2016 when they won again. Sure, it was 107 years, but it was worth it.
It was worth it. I looked right into Dr. Carlisle's eyes, and I said, please, don't let me die, Doc, until the Cubbies win just one World Series. In fact, make it 2. Yeah. He looked right at me and he said, all right there, just let me get a bite on your arm there. And here I am. That's what happened, Berla. Berla? Isabella Swan.
I can't stop talking about the Bears.
How cool Dr. Carlisle is, I think, is the last thing we talked about.
No, please continue.
I think you're right, though. Dr. Carlisle is a pretty neat character. I mean, the idea of a doctor who is a vampire who has such great self-control.
Because he's definitely seen blood, like, every single day.
Well, yeah.
And he's able to control himself.
A lot of people tend to die at that hospital. I don't know what's going on.
From blood loss. There's not a drop.
Why is our blood bank empty? Carlisle! I do think it's fun.
Now the head of the hospital is the head of Stalag 13.
Yes.
Colonel Klink.
His first name is Hogan Carlisle.
Shorts! Get me the test results! I know nothing. You're welcome, listeners.
Besides Carlisle, though, Charlie is definitely my favorite character. I do think Charlie is the most fun character, and I just wish the book had been from his point of view.
Sure.
What's going on with my daughter would have been a far more interesting story than what Bella's doing. This book could have become a horror story, which is what I secretly want it to be the whole time, really, if I'm honest. The story of a vampire has seduced my daughter, and I need to get her back.
Ooh.
That would be great. Yeah. And he's got a great sidekick, Native American in a wheelchair, Billy. I mean, wouldn't that have been an awesome book?
Which, I love the idea of when there's a full moon, there's not only baby werewolves that the other werewolves now have to like keep track of, but there's also elderly werewolves that change.
Besides the salve the witches gave them that turned them into wolves, there's also Ben Gay in there as well. Yeah.
Going back to Charlie, it really broke my heart towards the end when she was like, I hate it here, I'm moving back with my mom, like just to give like this whole fake spiel. And like, it's like, just explain why, like talk to me. Like, and it's like, no, you wouldn't understand. And like, then she leaves and snuck out with Edward. Don't be mean to him, he's the only nice guy in here.
I do agree, I thought that part was hard, but it just made me like Bella less. I found it funny how quickly she made up this ridiculous plan to escape the vampire who wants to kill her. And it just happens to involve hurting my father. Like, they're calling the A-team. They're in LA. They're not that far away. Come on. Get them in here. thought that was a bit of a silly chapter where she just suddenly makes up this ridiculous plan, which doesn't work at all, by the way. I think we should be clear about that. Yeah. I think Charlie is a much more interesting character. Having this policeman who has to save his daughter from a vampire, that would be a fun story. Yeah. And especially that they make the point continually in this book how much better at everything vampires are than humans. Like, that is all through this book. After a certain point, it gets annoying. But vampires are perfect and can do everything better than human beings. To have Charlie be the character who has to save Bella, that's far more interesting because the stakes are so much higher and his chances of succeeding are so much lower. Whereas, 6 vampires and a human being, and we have to stay away from one vampire. Oh, let's really make this hard for us. I think it would be a far more interesting story. And he does lose his daughter to Edward. Yeah. They do eventually get married. I don't think we can honestly say he's gaining a son in that situation. I think that would have been a far more interesting story if she had let her monsters be monsters more than she did. Like I was talking about earlier, how she made her vampires have no weaknesses. I think it's because she wanted her monsters not to be so monstrous. She didn't want them to have weird rules they had to follow. She just wanted them to be super powerful and beautiful.
Like, I've heard that scene where they're laying in, like, the sun and Edward is glittering. That's the dream she had. Yeah, yeah. And that's where it all started. It's like, oh, I can build a story around this. Which is encouraging to me that I can have stupid dreams and become a millionaire from them. So
I had a dream about a duck that talked to me and it sold me a cabinet. Better write a vampire book. You can get interesting ideas from dreams, like the movie The Lady Killers. The original Lady Killers was dreamed up by one screenwriter over one night. Wow. And he just woke up and he wrote the screenplay. That's where that movie came from. It seemed to work out pretty well for Stephanie. I mean, she got her book published and she made a ridiculous amount of money.
Did you know that Forks is a real place?
Really?
Yeah, I Googled it.
How do they feel about Twilight?
They have, I Googled looked at the Google images of it, and there's signs like, welcome to Forks, territory line, no vampires. Or reservation line.
I was going to say, is there a Native American reservation?
I don't know if there actually is, but they say reservation line, no vampires allowed.
So we just talked about our favorite part of the book, the interesting characters we prefer to have been the main characters. Yes. What is your least favorite part of the book?
Past that point, then you get that, I mentioned earlier, that second chunk of he has an angel face. He has a forehead of marble. And I'm like, oh my word, why? Stop talking. And the book ends and then it's epilogue. It's they go to prom. It's well, this wasn't even necessary for the story. Mm-hmm. And then that very last 1 or 2 lines of the book, it reminded me of The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. That entire book is the main female and the man be should we do it? Yeah, let's go do it. No, let's not do it. Should we do it? No. Yeah? Yeah? No. The end. He's married to her sister. Throughout their time together, she wants to do him, but he won't do it. And now he wants to do it, but she won't. When I was doing that...
By do it, you mean let's fall in love?
Yeah. Just birds do it.
And vampires do it. Even Native American werewolves do it. Let's do it. Bella, let's fall in love.
The entire book is should I bite her neck? No, I shouldn't bite her neck. Yeah, go ahead and bite my neck. And the very last sentence or two is I'll put my lips on your neck. I was just kidding. And then the last sentence is and then he put his lips on her neck.
Well, we actually have a copy here.
Maybe Alana read it differently. I don't know.
I want to see this for myself. Hang on a second. Okay, there's the epilogue. Okay. That's really funny. I didn't notice that.
Is that not part of the epilogue that you hated?
Just the whole epilogue. The epilogue is unnecessary.
It is.
Which is true for most epilogues. It's just kind of a nice little bow to put on top. But because the bow you're putting on top of the present was filled with my least favorite parts of the book crammed together, sure, I didn't like it. Yeah. It almost felt like fan fiction somebody wrote about Twilight. But what would happen if Edward took Bella to the prom, I thought that was probably the most cringeworthy part of the book. It really kind of had that 80s romantic comedy thing to it. Yeah. That I really...
You expect, don't you forget about me.
Don't you drain all my blood. There are other things about this book that I just didn't enjoy, but they're not things that are necessarily wrong with it. But I thought the epilogue was a bit of a bad choice. If you didn't have the epilogue, it would end with the two of them in the hospital, and it's a decently emotional ending. It wraps up everything, and the epilogue doesn't really do too much more than that besides delightful prom things, which I could see there'd be an audience for that, but I decidedly wasn't, and I think it was too egregious for me. Sure. It was definitely a bit more than I wanted in this book.
Especially since the entire book she's like, no, I'm not going to prom. I'm not going to prom. Okay, I'll go to prom.
I'll go to prom. For me, it's kind of a summary from my experience of actually reading Twilight. It's not badly written. I can tell it's not written for me, though.
Yeah.
The things I found most interesting in this book are all background stuff. They're things that, if they had been the main point of this book, I would have enjoyed it. I think that the characters are interesting as long as we're supposed to hate Bella. She's clearly a good author. She didn't really do anything that I thought was like bad writing.
Yeah.
But it's a book I had to find my own fun reading it, for sure.
Now, knowing that there are future books and knowing like she gets more into like maybe like the lore, does that interest you in maybe going forward with the next few books? Knowing that you'd have to trudge through romantic stories and knowing that Jacob's going to come back and become a...
If I knew that the continuing story had nothing to do with Bella and Edward, I would definitely be interested. But I know that it does. If I don't like the main characters, I don't plan to continue reading. How about you? Do you plan on continuing?
I don't think so. I definitely would read the Wikipedia page of the summer. So...
But on the whole, I'm very glad that we did read Twilight. For how often we've made fun of it, I'm glad that our opinions have some weight behind them and experience now instead of us just making fun of it. I feel like we are qualified now to make fun of it.
Because when they ask, like, oh, did you actually read it? Well, no. Now we can say, yeah, and I still hate it.
Yeah, I actually did read this Twilight book here, the vampire
with
thing.
I
had to make my own fun as I read the entire thing. Da Bears.
Da Bears. As we're winding down here, I did want to say we do have one line of our fan feedback. One of my closest friends and roommate from college, Phil, he's left us a message on Facebook, and, you know, this is a big compliment to you. He said, I asked for a book by P.G. Wodehouse for Christmas because Sam talked about him in at least 2 occasions. What a great author. Thanks, guys. Specifically Sam and not Bryce.
And that's how we're ending, everybody.
Yes. Why is that becoming the theme? Let's throw Bryce in front of the van instead of Bella.
Well, because you get hit by vans so well.
That's true.
You are a very tempting target, I think, Bryce. People know I'd break. I'm a very fragile soul.
I think that's a great compliment to our podcast. I mentioned way back in the very first episode that I had given the Ripley Believe It or Not books to one of my coworkers' son. And he's like, oh, I love this stuff in the book. And I love this and that about these books. It's all about finding books that you can enjoy because there are books out there for even people that hate books. I've known Phil for at least a decade now, maybe more.
And he's functionally illiterate.
He just likes P.G. Wodehouse for the photos. He's a great guy. He's got a lot of talents. He just doesn't like to read. And I remember one time we were waiting for a plane and I bought this book about Nikola Tesla and his life. And I was like, oh, you're bored? Do you want to read this book? I know we both like Nikola Tesla. And it's like, okay, I'll read it. And he ended up keeping the book. I was like, okay, I guess it's yours now. I never got to read it.
You never got to
No, I brought it along.
That's
it's like,
great.
Here's a new book about someone I enjoy reading about. And he kept the book. And I think the fact that I did this podcast, he listened to it because we're friends. But I think the fact that you found him a book that he could enjoy, that's just more encouraging. Like, there are books out there for people who even don't like books. And I think if that's all we've accomplished with this podcast, which it kind of is, I mean, I think that's definitely worth it. Just because you and I are both book lovers, and I think that we could share that joy with people who don't feel that way. I mean, I think it's fantastic.
One of the reasons we did this podcast is you and I do genuinely enjoy sharing what we read with each other. You and I made this podcast before we were making this podcast.
Yeah, that's very true.
This is something that you and I just do very naturally, even though it sounds so stilted after I edit it. I eat pears. I smell farts. Yeah. No, it's something that you and I would be doing anyway. I think
that's something we're going to continue to do afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
With a microphone. And we will be posting them.
So. But we're not allowed to put them online anymore because of legal reasons.
The FCC got involved.
Books really don't get to have this perspective on them very often of that sense of fun about books, that fun of sharing them, because we're not reading books like we used to. Like before there was television, before there was radio, people would sit and talk about what they're reading. It was the most important medium for the day. For people who don't enjoy reading, it's like, well, obviously books aren't fun. No, books are inherently fun. You're just not reading inherently fun books. You have to find books that are fun for you. Every book in the world that was published has somebody in the world who's going to enjoy it. It's just a question of, are you finding the book that you are going to enjoy? And the more that you read, the more you're going to know what you enjoy and what you should be looking for. So if you have not found a book that you enjoy yet, First of all, thanks for listening to a podcast about people talking about books. And secondly, there is a book for you somewhere out there. And if there's a book that we discuss that sounds interesting, go find it for yourself. Give it a try. The books that we read tended not to be too challenging, I think.
Yeah.
We tend to stick with stuff that was fairly short. Go find a fun book to read, guys. They're out there.
There was one thing, I'd never really found the right place to share it, but I guess the last episode is going to have to be it. There are ways that Book Reports Podcast is going to live on, and I don't mean on the internet. Back in November, NASA launched the InSight rover onto Mars, and previously in the year, they had said, if you sign up your name, we'll inscribe it on the InSight rover, and then you can have your name on Mars. That just so happened to be what I did. We have Bryce Diener has a boarding pass to Mars. We have Book Reports Podcast and Sam Tyler. So your name is now on Mars. My name is on Mars. And so is Book Reports Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
This is something that will live on long after we are dead. I will be sure to post these. Go to our Facebook page. You can look at our boarding passes that NASA was kind enough to email me.
And if Earth ever gets invaded, you now know why.
Exactly. We are international.
We're interplanetary.
That's right. And who else can really say that?
Oh,
Take that, NPR.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Bryce.
But if you'd like to listen to us on Earth, for whatever reason, you Earthlings, you can still find us on YouTube. We're going to be there forever. We'll still have our stuff up on iTunes. We still have those 3 random episodes on SoundCloud. Don't worry, Rockosaurus Rex, we haven't forgotten about you.
We will never forget about you. In fact, you're on Mars too. Look at that.
Yeah, you can still email us. I doubt we'll ever answer. But that's at bookreportspodcast@gmail.com. Our Facebook page will still be up at facebook.com/bookreportspodcast. You can still find Sam all the cool new stuff that he's still going to be getting into at skullduggeryinthesmoke.blogspot.com. And that's the end of Book Reports Podcast.
We are going somewhere, but this podcast isn't. It will remain around for people to enjoy. We may not be making new content, but we will be reading new books and talking about them without you. Ha ha ha. This is the part of Book Reports Podcast where it is your turn now. Go out, read some books, have some fun. If you know of somebody else who's also reading books, talk to them about it. Feel free to bother other people the way that I bother Bryce.
We're here at the end, and it just reminds me of that quote. Gandalf is talking to Pippin, and Pippin says, I didn't think it would end this way. Gandalf says, end. No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path, one that we all must take. The gray rain curtain of this world roll back, and all turns to silver glass. And then you see it. What, Gandalf? See what? White shores and beyond, a far green country under a swift sunrise. Well, that isn't so bad. No, it isn't. So listeners, this isn't the end. There's a green shore ahead. We won't be there because we're terrible people.
But have fun in Valinor without us is what we're saying. Yeah.
Right. I've been Bryce, Team Carlisle, Diener.
And I'm Sam, Team Charlie, Tyler.
And we'll see you never. See you, folks.
Hope is dead. Goodbye. Boy, I wish I sounded better for our last episode. Oh, well.
I wish I sounded better ever.
Well, I do want to talk about how the point of this whole podcast really is to remind people how much fun reading is.
Yeah, and to become famous. But that didn't work.
And become famous and make money off of it and get girlfriends. But is there anything else we need to discuss?
Is there something you didn't like about the book? We ask this every episode.
I thought we did that already. No, I loved every moment of this darn book.